Hello and welcome everyone. Let's get back to our discussion here. What really is the editing process, right? So, we look at documentary editing. How does the process work, right? So main steps here is we import original footage, A-roll and B-roll. Then you organize the footage by days or interview subjects, and then you review the interviews. You log or transcribe these, create an outline, and that can be written, so doing a text outline and kind of key statements, and then creating something that's called an assembly edit, and that's just putting together the interviews, right? So that's what we do. We start editing with our A-roll because that will help us structure what our story is about. So again, people do it different ways, but this is my recommendation as you're, looking at documentary editing, or if you've already made documentary films, you may want to explore it in this method and then, tweak it to your own preferences as well. But if you start editing with the A-roll, the interviews, you can then add the B-roll. So add the footage of, action shots or showing how things are done, or some of the source footage B-roll. Then you can play with adding some music and then adding text, titles, and graphics. And it doesn't have to always be in this order, but this is kind of a general idea of the editing process of how, best practices of putting something together. So you can see by putting together the interviews, we can quickly, by having the interviews and setting up the statements as they're made, then being able to put B-roll on top of that, adding some music and going from there. So how do you deal with the story? So documentary films, even though they're factual, we're still really aiming to tell a story. So the interviews and telling a story. So the concept here is there's a story in every interview. So it's a matter of extracting that story and finding the key, I like to call them the gems, and the key points. And those points should be helping advance and tell the story to your audience. So whatever that way may be, right? So in the example that we just watched about Left Ahead, it's about the photographer's story. Why does he do it? How did he start? Kind of purpose and the style, and explaining what he does, how he does it, why he does it, right? So that's really the story of that photographer artist, is the story we wanted to tell in a short few minutes. So documentary structure. So let's look at, we're gonna look at kind of this idea, like what is the structure. I'm gonna show a couple openings to look at the hook and what that means. So every story has a beginning, middle, and end. So I'd like to suggest a better way to structure a documentary is with an opening hook. So that could be a short introduction to the story and the themes. And usually it could be, pretty short, 15 seconds to a minute. Then from there, we go to the beginning, the actual beginning. So that's where, we want to use that beginning to help with the following. So we want to introduce our key interview subjects, names, occupation, that kind of who they are, and then provide an overview. So what is the film going to explore? And through the interviews, what's the controlling idea? What's the essence? Why is the story being told? What's it going to be about? Then we have our middle. So remember, we talked about beginning, middle, and end. So the middle, we're really following through with the story introduced in the hook and beginning. So we continue with providing supporting information, carrying through with the story. Where are we going with the story? We want to get all the material through the story of something. Then we introduce additional information and possible storylines, so we can help build towards the ending, right? So what can be added? So these can be little, twists and turns. So we build towards the climax. Then we get to the end, and then I like to call that, ideally you have a bit of something called a splash. So the end concludes their story, provides some final statements, hoping to work towards a conclusion as much as possible. And then we can wrap up all the storylines introduced in the middle. So any kind of these twists and turns, we wrap it up. How did everyone fare? Did the project complete? Did the photographer get their photo? Also, then the idea here is if we can provide a memorable splash that's similar to the opening hook. So it could be something that the audience will take away as a key message or point, right? So that kind of splash can be also viewed as a summary, and that's a great way to help build that final interest. And a takeaway point, tempo for doc. So because documentary film still utilizes shots, right, that are edited together, we're choosing how long to stay on the A roll or B roll, and then we can create a tempo, right? So faster edits create faster tempos. Longer shots create a slower tempo. So, think of action films. They're usually short shots, individual shots. So that's the same idea. If we have quick clips of interviews and B-roll, it's going to feel really fast. And, like the one we just watched, it was a little bit of a slower tempo to get us into the artist's work and photographs. And that was a slower tempo, right? So a great example of that kind of a slower paced film. So let's go right into, I'm just going to get into one of the hooks here, a sample that we can watch. So this is a documentary film called Swift and Bold, and we're going to watch the opening that essentially has a hook. So here, let's give it a look.
For me, it was pretty important because my father, my grandfather, my entire family was in the military. I'm actually named after my great uncle who died in France. So was my father. So it's a lot of heritage there.
Just knowing that you're representing your own country, if the time comes, you can help others that need to be helped.
The friends, the comradeship, I felt like I lost a part of me when I left it.
And the CO was asking the OC, hey, what unit are those guys from? And the OC replied, oh, those guys are the Queen's Rangers. Our OC said, yes, they're quite good. And I just happened to overhear that as I was passing by, and I was like, all right, we've done something well here.
We're called the Queens York Rangers, the first American regiment. I always wondered why we're the first American regiment where we originated in America.
First Americans refers to the fact that of the Loyalist regiments raised from amongst the American populace during the Revolutionary War, the Queen's Rangers were the first American regiment in the British Army raised entirely from the British colonies.
So there we go. That's the beginning there of the Swift and Bold film. So you can see it's a quick shots of B-roll, reenactments of military conflicts that the Queen's York Rangers were in. And from there we get into some interviews with all of the main subjects. So we get kind of a quick hook of what is this going to be about. We're going to figure out what are the Queen's York Rangers, and these are the people involved to get an idea of the people we're going to be interviewing, the whole dynamic of everyone involved. So that's that hook. So now the idea is that, hey, if you are interested in what's been presented so far in the hook, we're going to get into the beginning, takes us through the middle all the way to the end, and with some takeaway points, right? So that's a good sample of, you can just take that first I guess it was about 1.5 minutes is that hook. We're going to do a whole demo of editing, getting everything ready, but I just want to talk about a couple more things before we get to that. So let me just jump back into here. So if we're looking at the authentic voice, so editing words,